Good morning, Mr. Greider.
Hey, good morning, Andrea. It's a great time to be in non-QM. I'm telling you, I just got back from NAM, saw a lot of people there. I think there was more. It was unreal that, I seen all these agency wholesale lenders now doing non-QM and doing all that. So it's great to be in there. I thought this webinar was ideal as we're moving forward because, there's some housing affordability and how do you get these loans approved if they don't fit the traditional way or maybe properties don't. So this is a great segment to go into that. So I'll kind of let you start it out
Great.
and we'll begin.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. We will get started. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for attending our webinar today, Saving Your Agency Turndowns. Let's go ahead and get started. As always, I always like to share our disclaimer, so thanks in advance for your participation and support. As always, we have a really great agenda, very robust today. We will get through all of this in hopefully around 30 minutes, Mr. Greider. Looking forward to seeing your questions. Again, as you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will get to them. Also, as a reminder, everybody will be receiving a copy of this deck as well as a copy of the recording in the next day or so. Again, my name is Andrea Formato. I'm the sales training manager here, and we have Mr. David Greider attending and being our guest speaker. We also have Pete Garfinkel on deck, our VP of Credit for Non-QM, just in case we have some questions that we want him to be involved with.
Always good to have Pete on here.
That's right. That's right. So, Mr. Greider, I'll turn it over.
Into this, right, is I start thinking about it. Go, man, we don't really talk about this over the last probably webinars we've done over the last year or so, but you always end behind on the deck when you get a copy of it. But before I start out, kind of Home Express, kind of the story of why, I feel like we're one of the leaders in the non-QM. I was talking to Andrea, we're thinking about, hey, save your deal for the agency fallouts. And then we're looking around, wonder what's out there, right? Okay, there is a lot out there. And I'll just say, for example, I had one 15 minutes before this webinar started, and this might be on your desk. And these are deals that we can structure for you. And I figured I'd start out just with this one example, and I'll just go through it. Hey, David, I spoke to you at NAM, regarding this deal. That doesn't work, but I have another one here of a married couple where I cannot use tax returns. Well, why can't you use tax returns? Well, I got two borrowers, great scores. Let's say they're 800 apiece. They have 20 to 30% down. Okay, it's a purchase for 1.4 million in Northern California. The problem he's having is they're both W-2. One's W-2, but now on temporary disability. But the VOE will show permanent employee. She has salary with a guaranteed bonus of so much money per quarter. And here's the other thing that they threw in there, which I'm glad this particular loan officer asked the question. They have over $850,000 in assets. Okay. Hey, if once they get back on track, probably fit traditional in a year or two. These are deals we can put together. Okay, you might say, well, how? Well, let's look at this. We'll look at this a little bit later through this scenario. Just thought-provoking out there. What do you do if it doesn't fit traditional underwriting that you have through agency? So a little bit about Home Express that is important. We are a top 3 non-QM lender. Plus, we've added in over the last few years some agency business, right? We thought we'd take our credit expertise into that field so we can do the lower FICO government loans. We have 2 operation centers, one on the East Coast and West Coast. We lend in 46 states and the District of Columbia, right? So, which I'm real proud of. We actually funded deals in over 40 states last month, which is really good. So we have a good footprint out there. We're not credit experts. We underwrite to our own guidelines. I'm in credit committee. Same with Pete Garfinkel was on here, VP of Credit, and we go through this every week to kind of navigate this as the times go on. Sometimes we expand, which we've had a lot of expansion in our credit guidelines this year. And if you want to know more about some of those expansions, please talk to your account executive, right? Again, we have executive management with 30 plus years, each one of us in this business and manual underwrites. And when you're talking about the government, so we do have a delegated underwriters in-house for your manual underwrites and the more FICO ones we can really take care of for you. Move on to kind of a little bit of why Home Express and who is. We're very well capitalized company, strong balance sheet. I'd say when I talk to our operations VP that our pull through and approval rates extremely high, right? So I kind of see the numbers on the pull through and approval rate. Approval rates probably the 95% of the loans come in. You say, why does that happen? Well, we believe in highly trained account executives to go through up front. We don't want to waste your time on a deal that's not going to close. We're going to help you structure that up front, and that turns into a higher pull through, more closings, and more retention of those real estate agents and those borrowers for you for the next loan, right? And during some of the times that we've had, right, the high rate environment that we went up in early 2022, right, we honored all locks. We put in positions in our capital markets team to kind of navigate that so it didn't hurt your relationships that you have with borrowers and real estate agents. We'll go into the next slide, kind of give you a little timeline of kind of where we started. So we're not new in non-QM. We started in 2015. I've actually started here in March of 2016 when we were first able to take on loans, right? And so we've had a lot of technology through the times, right? That was in 2019, and we got more technology coming out later this year. So during the pandemic was probably a little bit difficult for a lot of lenders out there, right? So I remember sitting in March 2020, we're sitting in a meeting and we thought about, hey, we had such a great year in 2019 with $1 billion funded, thinking how can we take this to the next level? And then of course the private market shut down later in March. But we navigated that well. We kept all our employees, right? So we're able to reopen in June of 2020. And that kind of put us really in the front place because we had a full staff, we had accounts, and able to take the non-QM to the next level. But during that time, we saw lenders that had agency or government or segments of it. And we're not here to take the deals that you have from where you have in-house. We're here to help you with the deals that you can't close in-house. And as we're going into this year, you see some of the added products on there that we've added this year, 5 to 8, Freddie Mac, we do ITINs, condotel. So that's some of the expansion we've had on credit markets. And going into 2024, you're going to see a little more technology that we're bringing in to make it easier for you to do business with us. So that's kind of just a little background to tell you, but let's go on what non-QM and Home Express mainly helps with. I'd say the bigger percentage, and that's generally your self-employed borrower who utilizes a great tax accountant to limit their tax liability. And we have lots of ways to look at ATR on that. I guess the number one way to do that is from the business bank statements. We use personal. We have some other programs to fit ATR, which I share with you later. Real estate investors. And this is big. I came back in non-QM in 2015, and there was a gap of loans. And I was looking at some of these loans that we're getting in. And I was looking, where are they getting these loans? Because I said all these loans were paying off all these hard money deals, and they had like 800 scores, but they own 12 properties, right? And they had no outlet except for private money. And non-QM fills a legitimate need out there in a gap from that hard money segment to the prime or agency business of those in between files. What do you do with those, right? Hey, they're great credit, great assets, but doesn't quite fit the traditional guidelines through agency. That's why you probably see a lot of those loans coming to non-QM, and will help you grow your business as well. We also have some great first-time homebuyer programs. Again, we added in some of the government and Freddie products, but ultimately we're great with out-of-box scenarios and credit experts. So when you see scenarios that don't know do, all you have to do is remember to call your Home Express account executive. So with that, I think we might have a poll question or that kind of stuff coming up here. Kind of go through this one a little bit. Kind of already went through all this, so let's go to the poll question that we have for us, Andre, before we start with some of the key elements and differentiators between agency and non-QM.
Okay, sounds good, David. I love the poll, so let me
I
get
do
this
too.
one. Let me get this one going here. Are you able to see it?
I'm seeing it.
Okay, so question number one, what was the reason you couldn't close your last agency loan? Was it income or DTI issues? Was it because of credit, property type? Was it the reserves, or was it a non-owner occupied transaction? So this is going to be a good one, right, David? We'll
I
see here
have
what
no
we have.
idea on
I
this.
know, usually you
I
guess, but
don't.
this one, this is the wild card. We'll give it a couple more seconds, but this is exactly what we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into here in the next couple of slides. All right, it looks like, yep. Okay, I think you won't be too surprised with this one. So a couple more seconds.
I think it's going to be non-owner occupied transactions don't fit. That's
That,
my guess, just because of the units coming in. Then I default to income.
that's a good guess. Let's take a look.
Oh
So
wow.
so income was number one, but it looks like non-owner occupied was number two. So
Yeah.
you were
Wow.
not off.
Yeah, no, that's great. So hey, these are all good news is we have a lot on here. Everybody voted on some of these, right? So let's just go through these and look for solutions for these agency fallouts when you receive that. And again, I was talking to one of our leaders on the West Coast, and he goes, "Man, we got to do something with some of these loans that are coming in because we're taking them with maybe 2 weeks left on a purchase contract, right? Full packages because they're fallout or there's promises made. It comes in and doesn't quite fit, right? So let's look at the income first here. Again, I'll kind of mention this that great on the self-employed or that example I gave you, right? I had 2 W-2 employees, one's on temporary disability, other one great job, but then you can have assets used for the ATR piece. But bank statements versus tax returns, 1099 K1s, we have P&L programs as P&L only and P&L assist when you can grab the most recent 3-month bank statements, right? And you can combine a lot of these. Like you could have one borrower that's W-2, the spouse may be self-employed. We understand the multiple streams of income, right? We have programs with high residual income going to 55 DTI. And if they have rental properties, we can use lease agreements in lieu of the Schedule E. Other thing on here to point out, kind of on the did you know, use the higher earner score. I know when you do agency, you have to use the lowest score of the borrowers on the application. But as long as they all qualify for the program, we use the higher earner score. And that can help save the deal by getting that extra LTV and the rate associated with the higher earner score. And I also note here programs for less than 2 years self-employed as well. And again, I kind of remind you, they got to be make sense deals. Typically, when they're less than 2 years self-employed, we do require that they're in that field for a longer period of time in a manager's supervisory position when they're W-2 going into that. So we'll go to that. There's webinars on that as well. But these are some of the solutions you have. So when you run across a deal where, hey, DTI is not working, they're putting 20% down, DTI wasn't working, you can contact one of our highly trained account executives. They're going to be able to structure that deal and help that DTI work to fill and get that deal closed. Let's look at credit. So other thing is some people have credit requirements like this. This is kind of typical on agency on the scores though, right? We do have credit scores down to 620 on all our programs. Primex, to get the better rate, you probably have to have a little bit higher score. But just keep that in mind on that. Few trade lines requirements. I look at some of our trade line requirements. Man, if most people qualify on that, so if you're running some type of trade lines for this, we're also able to use alternative trades. And one of the best trades I can know is housing, right? So if you can get housing, they might be short on a typical trade line, we can use those. Other thing too is on mortgage rates. It kind of killed the deal. They have 1 by 30 the last 12 months. Those sometimes are very difficult to get done in agency. But we look at it with, it's isolated and resolved. We're able to navigate those, right? So we have programs up to 1 by 90 in the last 12 months. I'm not saying that's a good loan. We just need to understand it because these are loan stories. You just tell us kind of what happened, that it is resolved. A lot of times we can get past that. We have programs with recent credit events. That's your bankruptcy, foreclosures. Again, our guidelines say it must be settled, but we look at it as, hey, does this deal make sense, right? Was it isolated? Was their problem resolved? Go there. Another factor here, as I showed you on the next bullet point, is Chapter 13, right? We use filing date for the seasoning. So if they filed like 3 years ago or maybe 2 years ago and it's discharged, we're going to use that date for the seasoning. What that allows you to do is to get the extra LTV maybe needed on the deal and the pricing better. And again, we make exceptions with compensating factors. So if you can tell us the story and work with your accounts executive on that, we're going to be able to structure that and get that deal to close to approving exactly the way you need it and get that deal funded timely on time. Properties. This is also a good one, right? So I'm going to tell you, we might, in certain circumstances, and you might be tougher. What do I mean by that? You can't be totally unique, right? The dome homes, right? Those type of things. But what is unique with the non-QM, and specifically Home Express, is the rural versus suburban. We have programs for rural properties, and it doesn't mean it's remote. Remote might be a little challenge, but we still can get those done at the right LTV. But we have the ability to call the property what it is, regardless of what the appraiser puts on there. Remember, the appraiser has maybe three sections here, 3 boxes he can check. Urban, rural, or suburban, right? There's not suburban with maybe some rural characteristics, or rural but close to suburban. And so we kind of understand that, and we're not going to make you go back to the AMC and have it change, right? We're going to make that calls and keep that loan going down the path to closing. We have programs for non-warrantable condos, short-term rentals, condo tels, and 5 to 8 units, right? And then I was looking at pricing a deal, and I'm sorry if I'm a little muffled here. It worked great for that, so thank you for that comment on that. I was pricing out a deal on a second home, was it last week with this loan officer, and our pricing, given the LLPAs on some of these, is really competitive for the agency or maybe in the jumbo area. So keep that in mind. And then we also have the jumbo loans. We do loans up to $3.5 million, and so as you know, it goes over that conforming limits. We're able to help you out with those as well. All right. Reserves. This is another big one right here, is that I've seen some deals go agency and be short on reserves. So the typical ones, if they have a lot of rental properties or a few where they require reserves on each property finance, when we look at reserves, it's on the loan we're doing when you need it, right? So, but we do have programs where no reserves required. It's a lower LTV. We also have cash out that could be used for reserves on most programs. And again, like I talked about, reserves based on subject property. We also have some different calculations that you'd see different from agency versus non-QM, where you can use a higher percentage of like retirement accounts with us. Those factors a little bit better to give you more ability to close more loans when you expand that. When reserves are required, to kind of put this down, 6 months for loans under 2 million, 12 months for loans over 2 million. And you can get together on each transaction with your account executive and kind of let you know, based on the LTV and program we're going, what reserves are required.
Thanks, David. Before we move on to the next slide, we have another poll. I have to do my other one. So let's go ahead and launch this one. Okay, can you see it?
I can see it.
Okay, it's true or false, non-owner occupied. So true or false, Home Express allows non-owner occupied on both business purpose and consumer purpose properties. Wow, here we go. We got a strong feeling so far.
I'm hoping they get it right.
This
This is a program I worked on. Actually, Pete on here. I've worked on this one for a few bits of, a few whiles, thinking this is going to be a program that is going to be highly used once we get it out there and market it right, that we have this program. So I kind of gave it away, but I'm hoping
you kind of gave it away. That's okay. They were already there.
Are they already there?
Hold on, let's go. Share results.
All right, true.
Yes.
Right? And I was looking at, and again, everybody kind of hopefully gets in some of the economic news, right? Of like, man, debt loads are high, right? Everybody's kind of looking at the housing affordability and what they're going to do going forward, but their equity limits are up there, right? And so when you look at, some of the loans that are done specifically more on cash out, what is the purpose of that cash out? And before, everybody talks about business purpose DSCR, and we're thinking, man, there's going to be a lot of borrowers that have rental properties that have a lot of equity, but they're going to want to use it to pay off some debt, right? Some of these credit cards, especially the department stores, are 30%. Right? And maybe they don't want to go the HELOC route, maybe, or whatever have you, but you have options, right? So this is a big program as we're going into Q4 and Q1 of 2024 to have in your back pocket, right? So when you ask the question, you're going through what is the goal of this borrower? What do they want to do? And you look at the options, right? They have their primary, they might have a couple of other investment properties, right? Kind of know that you can still get that done with Home Express if it's used for consumer purpose, right? So let's look at the non-owner occupied transactions. And there's a lot of difference between agency and the non-QM. And I think we get about 60% of our units come in right now today on the business purpose side. So we do have programs of no income documentation is needed. It's not even on the 1003 or income, because we're basing off the credit profile of that borrower and the cash flow of the subject property, right? That's how those are done. And we've had webinars on that. There's a lot out there with that. And I think we're getting a real versed out there as an industry on that program. But some of the other things I kind of put in, what's different, right? With Home Express, we have 10-day seasoning on funds to close, right? The student needs 60 days on reserves if required based on LTV. These are ways to make the deal easier for you to get done. We also have cash out on our business purpose to 80% LTV. It's for a higher FICO borrower, you need a 1-to-1 ratio, right? We allow to close in a business entity. And I see a lot of these done in LLC because they don't want the liability shift. They want the liability shifted to the LLC on that rental property versus a personal. And so we understand that for the seasoned investors, and we allow that. There's no limit on property zone, financed or paid in full. We don't require lease agreements. We can use the 1007 or 1025, or it's known as the rent survey, but we also could use the lease agreements if you need actual. Right? So lots of ways to do it. And we allow short-term rentals, condo hotels, and non-portable. Rural is okay with lower LTVs. I don't mean remote. We all kind of know that. Because when I look at properties, we kind of look at it, is it marketable, right? And is it legal? That's kind of the questions we ask. So as long as a rural property is marketable and legal, and there's a market for it, we're okay with that on a reduced LTV. So let's go to the next slide. We're talked about consumer purpose. Questions. All right. The good news is we got a great VP of credit that got help out. I need some help, right?
Well, yeah, that's it. Okay, so we have a couple, David. The first one is for non-owner occupied. Can you do a purchase as a first-time home buyer?
Yes. I said that is part of our guidance. We allow that, but we got to make sure it makes sense, right? So it's really, why are they buying it? So as a make sense lender, if they're live and work in one city and they're buying their first time home, 5 miles from where they work, right, and where they presently live, that would be a kind of a struggle. But we do understand where there's individuals that live in high market areas, want to diversify and get into rentals and maybe get into that. And so I could see, Southern California person that makes good money, don't want to buy a house right there or can't find the house, but they want to invest in real estate. They go to Arizona, Texas, Vegas, or those type of areas to get rental properties, and that's okay with us.
Great, thank you. So speaking of rural, as we have been mentioning, do we have acreage limits on rural?
Yeah, you kind of look at that. That's a difficult one for me to because we can look at things, at an excess acreage, but typically when you see excess acreage, you got to ask why, right? Is that a good rental property? So I don't know the marketability of that, but typically you'd want under 20 acres is kind of what you're looking at on the rural side, and that it makes sense. But the value of the home itself versus the land could play a pull into the loan or LTV we can make. So those type of things, I'd rather take a case by case, but I would kind of stick if you went to a kind of a rule or kind of a box would be under 20 acres. But we can look at deals above that if it makes sense.
Great, thanks, David. Here's another one that just came in. Are co-signers allowed?
Co-signers, man, that's a great question. I'd have to know a little more details on that. We do allow in certain cases non-occupying co-borrowers, so I think that might be the question. But I'd have to know that scenario to do. So if it's not, I think it's a non-occupying. That's what I would gather with it by the question. But it'd be a non-occupying borrower, right, or
Mhm.
borrower.
Okay, great. Another one is, do we allow non-warrantable condos?
Yes, we do. And I'm going to tell you the two typical ones that go through really fairly easy, and that's the occupancy factor, right? So you have a high concentration of renters in that unit, or might have leasehold land on the recreational facility. The ones that you're going to have a little more challenge on is the ones that are in litigation, especially if it's for defects of the buildings, right? And it's not resolved. But if those are resolved, all it's taken care of, and maybe they're the plaintiff suing the builder, but it's already taken care of. That could be okay too. I just caution you on the litigation. Make sure you kind of run that through your account executive first.
Great, thanks, David. Let's see. Do we require HOA reserves for condos?
Yes, I mean, it's kind of scary to think of an HOA who doesn't have a certain amount of reserves set aside, right, for some type of events that may happen, right, and then just normal care of the facility, right. So yes, and you can get to this. Maybe you can tell us why that doesn't have reserves. We'll take a look at it, but generally that puts a pretty high risk into it, right.
Yes, thank you. And then what are our loan limits, David?
Okay, non-QM, it's 100,000 to 3.5 million, but I have seen us go above 3.5 million. On FHA, we actually don't have a loan limit, right? Or a bottom to that level. But I guess, when you look at it, would someone want to do a $50,000 loan on FHA? So, but you might have a borrower at 75, 80,000 that fits FHA. We'll take a look at that for you.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Well, it looks like that is all of the questions that we have today. So I will go ahead and wrap it up. Looking ahead to next month's webinar, it is going to be Thursday, October 5th at 10 a.m. And it's going to be cash out options. David, what do you think about that?
I like it because I think there's a lot of deals out there that we could do that you don't know of in the non-QM at Home Express. Just what comes to me as someone said, was pitching to all the broker base, getting a lot of this is that seasoning, right? No seasoning on investment property. What does that mean? That means you have an investor that buys a property, let's say 4 months ago, right? And it's a certain value. They put a lot of money to fix it up to get market rents, and it's out there being marketed now. Maybe they have a new tenant in there, and they had appreciation. They want cash out. What do you do in those with those? Well, you send them to Home Express. That's what you do, right? And so I just want those kind of things out there. What we can do to help you close more loans with cash out, which I think you'll see some of that going forward into the remaining of this year and the first part of next year.
Excellent. Thank you. We're super excited about that one. So just again, as we always say, if you are an approved broker with us, thank you so much. We enjoy your support and partnership. If you are not an approved broker with us, it is very easy to become one. Just go to our website. You can look through the procedures on how to do that. You can go and actually apply online. So it's very, very simple. And then lastly, your favorite part, Mr.
Yeah.
Greider.
Call me, email me with any
Call 'em.
question you guys have.
There you go. Please reach out. You can always reach out to your account executive, but if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to David Greider. There's his contact information. And again, everybody, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time here. Everybody will be receiving a copy of this deck as well as the recorded copy of this presentation. David, thank you for your time. Pete, thank you for joining us. Everybody have a wonderful Thursday, a wonderful month of September, and we will see you next month. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.